everyone. My name is Aurelia Friedman-Frank. I am Congressman Lieu's Special Projects Manager and Senior Field Representative. Thank you all for joining today. I'd like to start off by welcoming everybody. This Youth Advisory Council is a great group of 25 young folks in the district that do a lot of great work to recommend bills and to make our district better, and just want to thank them all for all of that. I'm going to start off by introducing the Congressman and giving a quick bio of him, and then he'll start with some opening remarks. So Congressman Ted Lieu represents California's 36th congressional district in the U.S. House of Representatives. He is serving in his sixth term in Congress and sits on the House Judiciary Committee and Foreign Affairs Committees. He also was elected by his colleagues to serve as the vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, making him the highest ranking Asian American to have ever served in House leadership. Congressman Lieu is a veteran, and he served on active duty and then in the reserves for the Air Force, and he retired in 2021, and in 2021 he retired in the rank of colonel. So thank you so much for coming, Congressman Lieu, and we'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Aurelia, and I want to thank all the members of the Youth Advisory Council for participating in today's Youth Virtual Town Hall. We have done this a number of times in the past, and they've always been very well received. And I just want to start off by first thanking the Youth Advisory Council for the great work that all of you do. I just want to explain a little bit about what it's like to be a member of Congress. We're in 2-year legislative terms, and every 2 years I vote over 1,000 times, either in committee or in the floor. And I'd say in about 80–90% of those times, I don't get a single meeting, email, phone call. So the work of the Youth Advisory Council is really important because the council brings to my attention different bills and different issues, and it causes my staff and me to go, why are these bills or issues brought to our attention? What's so important about them? It causes us to focus. And you'll see today at this town hall just how diverse the issues are and the scale of the kind of issues that Congress deals with. And I just really appreciate the Youth Advisory Council for all their hard work. Right now, we are in the midst of fighting over a big reconciliation bill, also known as a budget bill, essentially. And I am part of the House Democratic Caucus. We oppose this bill. I was elected by my colleagues as vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, number 4 position in leadership. And our position is that our view of this bill is that it is bad for America. It's going to kick millions of people off health care, and it's going to really hurt our country going forward. So essentially, this bill, as proposed, is going to be the largest cut to health care in U.S. history, about $1 trillion in cuts. Non-partisan estimates indicate that about 13.7 million people will be kicked off of healthcare. And why do you ask, would Republicans want to do this? Because they want to give tax breaks that will primarily benefit the top 1%. Another study came out showing that essentially the top 1% get these massive tax breaks, but if you're lower income, your taxes actually start increasing after a few years. And so we believe this is a very harmful bill, and it's going to have dramatic cuts to Medicaid, also known as Medi-Cal in California. 2/3 of nursing home patients rely on Medi-Cal in California, and we have lots of people that rely on Medi-Cal for healthcare. So if you kick these people off, it's going to be devastating for them and their families. And it doesn't even really save money because essentially folks are still going to get healthcare. They're just going to walk into the emergency room when they're really sick, and that costs us even more money. So this past Friday, the bill failed to make it out of budget committee. The Republicans are going to try again tonight. So we'll see what happens, but we've been pushing back and happy to answer any questions later about this bill. But for now, I do want to welcome all of you to this town hall and also introduce Lucy Chen Kaplan, who is the president of the Youth Advisory Council, and the great work that she has done. And I'm going to have her proceed next. So thank you so much for participating and look forward to this town hall.
Thank you so much, Congressman Lieu, and good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. My name is Lucy Chang Kaplan, and I'm a senior at US Charter High School. This year, I've had the incredible privilege of serving as president of Congressman Lieu's Youth Advisory Council. Representing students from across California's 36th congressional district, the council was able to bring our ideas, opinions, and experiences together to make this year engaging and productive. From September 2024 to May 2025, we covered topics including homelessness, climate change, community safety, social justice, foreign policy, and healthcare. As the council discussed legislation, we thought not only about our community of Los Angeles and Southern California, but also about our country and how people all over our nation might be affected by our decisions. In the end, we recommended over 30 bills for the Congressman's co-sponsorship, 6 of which have already been co-sponsored. The bills that were co-sponsored by the Congressman improve our country's cybersecurity around the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, reform Medicare health insurance policies, and provide grants for maternal health care in underserved communities. In addition to reviewing legislation, we also had the wonderful opportunity to learn from Congressman Lieu's staff during our meetings, where we gained a deeper understanding of how policy is shaped on the Hill. By the end of the year, our council authored, debated, and voted on 3 original policy proposals focused on education, healthcare, and climate change, which we proudly submitted to the Congressman. It's been an incredible, rewarding year, and today we're thrilled to share with you what we've accomplished. So without ado, I will hand it off to our wonderful Olivia Orr, who will be presenting legislation we covered in our September meeting.
Okay, the first bill that the council recommended for co-sponsorship was the H.R. 7451, the Youth Homelessness Guaranteed Income Pilot Program Act of 2024. This bill would establish a pilot program to provide both financial and non-financial housing assistance to unhoused individuals from ages 18 to 30. The program's outcomes, including housing stability and health metrics, would be studied for future policies and policymaking. While some members expressed concerns about the need for greater financial regulation and were initially hesitant to support the bill, the council ultimately agreed it was a positive step in the right direction and recommended co-sponsorship. Additionally, some council members recommended that there should be additional opportunities for mentorship incorporated into the bill in the form of career coaching or academic tutoring in order to help people affected by homelessness gain independence and reduce the likelihood of future youth homelessness. The second bill was H.R. 5221, or the Homeless Children and Youth Act of 2023. This was strongly recommended for co-sponsorship because it aims to improve the access for housing access for children, youth, and families by standardizing the federal definition of homelessness and allowing communities to have more flexibility in allocating funding. Although some members raised concerns because there is a lack of support for higher education and the potential dilution of resources and privacy issues, there is strong and broad agreement that clarifying definitions through legislation would better help direct aid to those in need and strengthen support for individuals. The third bill was H.R. 3847, the Support for SNAP Act. This was also strongly recommended by the Council for co-sponsorship. This bill would direct the USDA to launch a pilot program to raise the awareness and provide support for unhoused individuals eligible for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which would help individuals afford nutritious food by supplementing their existing grocery budgets. While initial concerns centered on sustainability and dependency from the council strongly supported this bill due to its reduction of bureaucratic barriers, existing congressional support, and potential to ease the economic stress is for many individuals. Finally, the council strongly recommended co-sponsorship of H.R. 6041, the Runaway and Homeless Youth and Trafficking Prevention Act of 2023. This bill enhances federal support for youth experiencing homelessness or are at risk of trafficking. Key provisions include extending shelter stays from 21 to 30 days, raising the age limits for transitional housing to 25, establishing a prevention services program, and expanding grants for rural and marginalized communities. Moreover, this bill would include trauma-informed services, substance use disorder education, and suicide prevention services. The council praised the bill's holistic approach and its alignment with real challenges faced by vulnerable youth. Next, I would like to introduce Tara and Michael, who will be presenting on our October meeting, where we discuss bills about climate change.
Thank you, Olivia. We're now going to move to legislation the council voted on in support of on climate change during our October session. The following legislation covers a variety of topics related to climate change, like clean energy investment, transportation, and wildlife preservation. This was a very important issue for us as our generation will be heavily affected by its future. Tara?
Thank you, Michael. The first bill we want to discuss is H.R. 5618, the Clean Energy Victory Bond Act of 2023. So, this bill proposes using Treasury bonds to fund clean energy projects. Think solar, wind, geothermal, energy efficiency, and EV infrastructure. The idea is to let everyday Americans invest in the country's shift to renewables and get a reliable return backed by the government. When we talked about this bill on the council, the only worry that really came up was about the cost to government or how fast these projects will actually pay off. But we came to the conclusion that overall, this bill boosts clean energy and gives people a great way to support it financially.
Mhm. Next is H.R. 8253, the Build Green Infrastructure and Jobs Act of 2023. This bill establishes a green transportation infrastructure grant program. The bill proposes a $50 billion investment over 10 years to electrify and modernize public transportation systems, including public vehicles and rail, and to expand electric transportation to infrastructure nationwide. The council really approved of this bill as it provided federal support for public transportation authorities across the country. An example of that could be the LA Metro, to move to renewable energy, lessening their negative impact on the environment while also modernizing their technology. Transportation, whether public or private, is one of the main drivers of climate change in the United States. This legislation hopes to combat that problem by giving different authorities across the country the opportunity to make that transition with federal support.
Next bill is H.R. 8656, Modernizing Wildfire Safety and Prevention Act of 2024. Obviously, this is a very prominent bill at the moment given the most recent devastating wildfires. And this bill focuses on boosting wildfire prevention and safety by funding fire prevention programs through grants and other support. It's all about reducing wildfire risks and protecting vulnerable communities and natural areas. When we brought up this bill in the council, we had some questions about how the funds would be distributed or if its implementation was enough to make a real impact. But I think, especially given the most recent wildfires, this would be a great bill to help prevent disasters before they happen.
Next, we have H.R. 9120, the SAFE Act. This bill establishes an integrated national approach to respond to ongoing and expected effects of extreme weather and climate change by protecting, managing, and conserving the fish, wildlife, and plants of the United States, and to maximize government efficiency while doing so. In the end, the council recommended this bill because we felt it was a great way to continue conservation efforts as climate change worsens, while also improving government efficiency in these efforts, kind of through a streamlined definition. This will help conservation efforts, whether through the Bureau of Land Management and different government organizations, to adapt to the changing conditions of climate change, and really just set up conservation efforts for kind of a changing future as climate change affects the environment.
And then finally is H.R. 9573, the Polluters Pay Climate Fund Act of 2024. This was a very memorable bill because it would make big polluters pay into a major fund to help tackle climate change and support disaster recovery. So the goal is to hold them accountable for the damage they've contributed to. This bill really stood out to the council, although it may face some pushback from powerful industries. With the right funding and implementation, which all begins with public policy like this, it's a huge win for climate justice and could bring in serious funding for recovery efforts. Thank you, and we will now hand it over to Anthony Patnos.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to just talk about some of the bills that the council supported to help improve gun control and community safety. So first, we talked about the National Gun Violence Research Act, which essentially would create a federal initiative to study gun violence, its various causes and effects, and prevention strategies. It aims to generate real evidence-based solutions through collaborating, so by having agencies collaborate and make the most effective solutions possible. And as a council, we recognize the importance of using data to make effective policy decisions that are going to be most accurate. And next, we went over the SAFES Act. This gives a tax credit for gun safe purchases, and it also requires a report on the most effective gun safes. After discussion on the council, we found that it's a very sensible and practical approach to gun safety, and that it encourages the responsible storage of guns and other firearms through incentives rather than mandates. And next up, we also supported the Gun Theft Prevention Act, which essentially tackles the issue of stolen firearms from licensed dealers, which is a major source of black market guns. This act would push for stronger security standards and more frequent inspections by the ATF. And the council appreciated the focus on kind of closing the loopholes in the legal distribution system for guns to limit the amount of guns on the black market and kind of maintain control on the guns that are in circulation. Next up, we had the School Violence Protection Act. And this is mainly going to be, or we hope to implement it to target youth at risk of high violence. It funds the trauma-informed care, mental health support, and equitable community resources aimed at, limiting the risk of at-risk youth to gun violence. And this one particularly stood out to us on the council because it treats violence as a social issue rather than just a security problem, looking after the people as kind of the primary effort, and kind of thinking that if we can improve the mental health of those that, might suffer from gun violence or help those in the community, then the problem can be somewhat alleviated. And finally, our last one was the Preventing Pretrial Gun Purchases Act, which would essentially close what is a loophole that allows individuals under a court-ordered restriction to still buy guns. And it reinforces the background check system that's already in place. So it was a very, a lot of us on the council really supported this act to just kind of encourage further efforts towards gun safety. And across the board, we emphasized a lot of common sense reforms to balance safety, individual rights, and community responsibility through data, various incentives, and through, as I said, common sense measures that are for safety minimum. And thank you so much for listening. And next, I'd like to introduce Ryan Doe to talk about social justice and civil rights.
Hello, everyone. So now we're going to be going on to the topic of social justice and civil rights. So the first bill that we looked over was HR 4602, which was amend the Code for Marriage Equality Act of 2023, which mostly works to amend various federal laws, to replace gender-specific terms like wife and husband with gender-neutral terms such as spouse or married couples. Also, it defines marriage as a legal union between two people as spouses, removing previous definitions that referred only to opposite-sex couples. We believed as a council this was important because it kind of protects federal language to be more LGBTQ plus inclusive. It kind of eliminates outdated discriminatory language against queer families, and it also confirms marriage equality in all institutions. So as for the next bill that we went over HR 7354, the Protect Black Women and Girls Act, which works to establish an interagency task to examine the conditions and experiences of Black women and girls across various sectors. This would include healthcare, labor, housing justice, civil rights, economic development, all these different things. The task force aims to identify and assess the effectiveness of existing policies and programs to kind of study the societal effects on Black women and girls, and kind of just to protect these specific group of individuals and their civil rights. So the reason why we thought this bill would also be important is because we saw that, we saw a specific group of people that we felt were too often left out of, national policy conversations. We decided to endorse it because it amplifies kind of like, the Black woman voice, specifically in different sections such as healthcare, education. It kind of puts Black women at the center of discussion, and it brings more towards, intersectional justice for the Black community. And as for the third bill that we would go over is the HR 4183, which is the Economic Inclusion Civil Rights of 2023, which aims to amend Section 1977 of the revised statutes, which to ensure that all individuals within the United States have the same right to participate in economic activities as white citizens. This kind of goes to further push what was originally advocated within the 13th and 14th Amendment rights, which the 13th Amendment was the amendment to abolish slavery, and the 14th Amendment is to ensure that nobody's right is deprived by the law without due process. So the reason why we thought as a council this was an important bill was because it promotes civil rights in commerce and employment, and it guards economic opportunity across race lines. And it's essential to, bring more equitable policies, especially for young people who are newly entering the workforce. And, overall, we just believe that economic freedom shouldn't be dependent upon skin color, but that young adults deserve a square deal in the career field. And as for the next bill that we did the HR 10092, which eliminates bias in algorithmic systems. So it mandates that federal agencies, oversee algorithmic systems, establish dedicated civil rights offices. These offices are tasked with identifying, preventing, and addressing biases, discrimination, and other harms resulting from these algorithmic processes. So the reason why we thought as a council this matter was because it ensures that AI does not kind of like exist biases when employers are making decisions in hiring or lending practices. It also enables the government's use of technology with transparency and fairness, and it also protects kids from harm created by hidden algorithmic systems. And as for the final bill, we did HR 4980, which is the Fair Calculations in Civil Rights or in Civil Damages Acts of 2023, which prohibits the courts from awarding damages to plaintiffs in civil actions using a calculation for projected future earning potential. And this would be calculated based on the plaintiff's race, ethnicity, gender, religion. And the reason why I think we as a council thought this was also important was because it would kind of like ban discriminatory economic assumptions being made within the court. It would also protect the worth of marginal lives in court decisions, and it ensures that no matter what your skin, identity, or color may be, that it protects kind of like the fairness of how much equal legal compensation that every single victim can get. So now I'll be moving to the next part, which is cybersecurity and foreign policy for Cleo and Natalie.
Hi, thank you very much, Ryan. First of all, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you everyone for coming. So we'll hop right into it. First, Cleo will cover the HR 10268 U.S. Engagement in Sudanese Peace Act.
Okay, hi everyone. The purpose of this bill is to require the imposition of sanctions with respect to conflicts in Sudan and for other purposes. The council was in support of this bill, mainly because the council recognized the massive humanitarian crisis that Sudan faces. But there was a fair amount of criticism for this bill too, because members were worried that sanctions could have limited effectiveness or have a destabilizing effect, which would in turn further harm the Sudanese population. However, because of the massive humanitarian crisis, the council did recommend that the congressman co-sponsor this bill.
Thank you, Cleo. Now I'll introduce the HR 2010 NATO EDGE Act. So what this bill does is that it aims to prevent the President of the United States from unilaterally withdrawing from NATO and reinforce the US's commitment to the treaty. In addition, it emphasizes the importance of all NATO members meeting defense spending, which is the 2% requirement of their GDP. Members of the YAC regarded this as a critical bill, considering the timeframe of the US's involvement in the Ukraine war. Members expressed approval of the 2% condition in encouraging European allies to take a leading role in regional security. However, members also questioned whether this might fall into a possible constitutional gray area by infringing on executive authority. In addition, members posed questions about NATO's future trajectory and the risks of provoking Russian aggression. The Council does not overwhelmingly recommend the Congressman to support this bill, with the 68.4% of the Council voting yes and a 31.6% voting no.
Okay, the next bill that fell under foreign policy that we recommended was the No Invading Allies Act. And the goal of this bill is to prohibit funds for the armed forces to be used in operations to invade or seize territory from Canada, the Republic of Panama, or the self-governing territory of Greenland. Most members held favorable views towards this bill, and 84% of the council decided in favor of this bill. Most members thought that it was a useful tool for both messaging to the Democratic base and for providing a sense of security to American allies. However, there were some critics who saw the bill as too topical and disliked the fact that it had an absence of an expiration date.
The next bill we will introduce is the HR 407 Prevent Tariff Abuse Act. The goal of this bill is to amend previous legislation to limit the President of the United States' authority regarding tariffs. There was unanimous support within the Council for this bill because of the risks that tariffs pose to the American consumer and the limited benefit they carry if they are not carefully planned out. 100% of the Council recommends that the Congressman sponsor this bill.
Okay, now we're going to move into the artificial intelligence part of this. Our next bill that we recommended for co-sponsorship was the Consumer Safety Technology Act. And the purpose of this bill is to direct the Consumer Product Safety Commission to establish a pilot program to explore the use of artificial intelligence to study and report on the use of blockchain and technology and tokens. The majority of the Youth Advisory Council appreciated how this bill would provide a tech update for the federal government. They thought that it would help protect consumers and alert the government about domestic or foreign security threats. However, one concern was that was about the environmental impact of using AI on such a large scale. But the council did vote overwhelmingly to support this bill, and 84% of members voted yes.
For our next bill, we have reviewed the HR 1027 Quiet Act, and this bill would amend the Constitutional Communications Act of 1934 to require disclosures within respect to robocalls using artificial intelligence and to provide enhanced penalties for certain violations involving artificial intelligence voice or text message impersonation. Many members had experiences with scam calls and appreciated how this bill would prevent such common annoyances. The increased penalties for AI impersonation would discourage fraud and protect everyday Americans. So, as such, 94.7% of the members voted yes and 5.7% voted no.
Okay, this next bill you can see was already co-sponsored by Ted Lieu, and 100% of the council recommended that the congressman co-sponsor this bill. This is the 988 Lifeline Cybersecurity Responsibility Act, which would amend Title V of the Public Health Service Act to secure the suicide prevention lifeline from cybersecurity incidents. The council really appreciated this bill, especially because of how prevalent mental health awareness is to youth. The 988 line is heavily relied upon, and so it's important to make sure that it's protected from misinformation. This bill did receive.
Moving on to our next bill, the HR 5808, Preventing Deep Fake Scams Act. This bill would establish a task force on artificial intelligence in the financial services sector. The task force would report on, for one, how banks and credit unions prevent fraud that utilizes artificial intelligence. For two, the best practices for financial institutions to protect their customers. And for three, regulated and related legislative and regulatory recommendations. The council worried that implementing this task force would cost a lot of money, but recognized that deepfakes will likely become a major issue in the future. As such, this would be a worthwhile investment for the country and help it move with the times. While some members hoped for broader coverage apart from the financial services sector, many recognized how important having secure money is to every American. As such, the council strongly recommends the congressman to co-sponsor this bill, with an 89.5% voting yes and an 10.5% voting no.
All right, thank you for listening to us, and now we're going to turn it over to Dylan Newman.
Thank you very much, Cleo. Hello, everyone. My name is Dylan Newman, and today I will be presenting the last topic that we discussed this year, healthcare. So the first bill is HR 247, the Healthcare Affordability Act of 2025, which was recently co-sponsored by the Congressman. This bill seeks to expand eligibility for the refundable premium tax credit under the Affordable Care Act. The council recommended this bill for co-sponsorship because of its potential to significantly reduce healthcare costs and expand access to affordable coverage for low and middle income families. To HR 610, this bill was also co-sponsored by the Congressman, and this bill proposes reforms to Medicare supplemental health insurance policies, which is also called Medigap. Key provisions include expanding guaranteed issue rights, eliminating certain limitations for newly eligible Medicare beneficiaries, and modifying other aspects related to Medigap policies. This bill was particularly important because it aims to reduce unnecessary Medicare spending by limiting first dollar coverage in Medigap plans. Additionally, these plans cover all out-of-pocket costs, which could lead to overutilization of medical services. By restricting this coverage, the bill encourages more cost-conscious use of healthcare, which overall helps improve Medicare's financial sustainability. Now, the third bill that I will be talking about is HR 1966, which was also co-sponsored. This bill provides grants aimed at expanding and improving maternal health care services in minority, low-income, and medically underserved communities. The priority of HR 1966 is given to community-based providers with culturally and linguistically appropriate care. This bill stood out to the council because it ultimately aims to reduce maternal health care disparities by funding expanded healthcare in underserved communities. Now, I will be talking about HR 1392, Improving Mental Health and Reentry System Act of 2025. This bill focuses on improving mental health services for individuals re-entering society from incarceration. It provides funding to the Bureau of Prisons, states, and localities to conduct mental health screenings and offer referrals to mental health care providers for individuals in prison or jail. Now, HR 929, this bill extends funding for 5 years for programs that support the mental health of healthcare workers. It enhances existing initiatives by promoting awareness of mental health services, by supporting organizations that reduce administrative burdens, and continuing grants to address burnout and well-being in the healthcare force. The council recommended HR 929 because it renews and expands critical mental health care support for healthcare workers. And then building on the original 2022 law, this bipartisan bill extends funding for through 2030. And then the last bill that I will be talking about today, which was co-sponsored, is H.R. 307, the ARC Act of 2025. This bill amends Titles 18 and 19 of the Social Security Act to provide coverage for peripheral artery disease, PAD, screening tests for at-risk beneficiaries under Medicare and Medicaid. The goal is to facilitate early detection and treatment of PAD, thereby reducing the risk of amputations and improving patient outcomes. And this bill is very, very important for society. Okay, and now we will be talking about several bill ideas that the council came up with this year. Let me pass it on to Evan and Dahi.
All right, thanks, Dylan. Hi, everyone. My name is Evan. I'm a junior at Chadwick School, and I worked with Dahi Rue from South High School to introduce the Empowering and Valuing Educators Act. We noticed that across the nation, teacher shortages are at a crisis point, with over 86% of schools reporting hiring challenges in this academic year, and nearly half of teachers are considering leaving the profession due to low pay, burnout, and lack of support. We introduced this bill to ensure educators are fairly compensated and supported, especially in high-need communities, so all students receive quality education from committed, experienced teachers.
The Empowering and Valuing Educators Act proposes improvements to both the financial stability and working conditions of teachers by incentivizing both financial equity and manageable workloads within the education sector. Providing substantial bonuses for teachers committed to serving in underserved schools, this bill mandates salary increases to ensure equal pay across districts, implementing workload support measures, and establishment of teacher wellness programs. This bill mitigates factors contributing to teacher attrition, fosters a more positive and equitable teaching profession, and ensures that all students have access to high-quality instruction from supported and valued educators. Now I'm going to pass it on to Olivia Cow to introduce another potential bill.
Hello, everybody. My name is Olivia. Thank you, Dahi and Evan. Today, I'll be presenting my legislative proposal, which is called the Wandering Recovery Act. The Wandering Recovery Act aimed to increase the availability, affordability, and establishment of safety resources for those who suffer from cognitive impairments. Some of these cognitive impairments that individuals may suffer from include Alzheimer's disease, other forms of dementia, and severe autism. And about 1 in 9 people over the age of 65 are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, which is a form of dementia that causes many mental and cognitive functions to progressively degenerate, and there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And so this means that countless hours of dedication and care have to be provided to assist the everyday lives of these individuals. Wandering is a very common and often forgotten about side effect of cognitive impairments, and this can cause a lot of stress on families and friends of these individuals. And so the goal of the Wandering Recovery Act is to bring peace of mind to these individuals and their families through establishing a uniform cost of safety resources to $0, among other methods of providing these safety resources, which I can talk about in a bit. But basically, this bill will expand the implementation of Project Lifesaver across the country, which is a system of search and rescue radio tracked bracelets. And this bill will improve the availability of these Project Lifesaver bracelets, the affordability of these bracelets to a cost of $0, and the establishment of these bracelets across federally approved health centers across the country. And the safety of loved ones is not a partisan issue, and it should be something that all American families prioritize. So, yeah, that's the Wandering Recovery Act. And now I will pass it on to Lucy to introduce her bill idea.
Thank you, Olivia. So I proposed the One America Resilience Act because in 2024 alone, the U.S. experienced 27 weather and climate disasters costing at least $1 billion each. In the past 3 years, there have been over 1,500 preventable civilian deaths due to natural disasters. Most recently in January, when thousands of acres of homes and land burned in California, some members of Congress proposed conditions attached to the aid for us affected by the fires. Some of these conditions, such as changes to our immigration policies and voter ID, had nothing to do with the fires at all. Our current federal disaster processes can be slow, bureaucratic, and now possibly conditional, delaying necessary support for affected communities. Furthermore, rebuilding efforts often neglect proactive mitigation strategies that could lessen the impact of future disasters on vulnerable communities. Therefore, the One America Resilience Act proposes an immediate, unconditional first round of aid following a declared natural disaster. Examples of first round aid would include evacuation support, emergency shelter, medical care, and essential supplies. This is followed by a second round of funding that incentivizes states and localities to implement resilience measures such as forest management, coastal resilience, and infrastructure improvements. The funds for this bill would be redirected from FEMA's disaster relief funds to prioritize proactive resilience measures rather than just reactive disaster recovery. Funds will be allocated directly to states and local governments, giving them the flexibility to implement resilience programs that best fit their needs rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all federal mandate. The One America Resilience Act represents a balanced, bipartisan approach to disaster relief and preparedness. By ensuring swift initial aid without conditions and incentivizing long-term resilience planning, this legislation provides a comprehensive solution to America's increasing vulnerability to natural disasters. Now we'll move on to our Q&A with Congressman Lieu. The first member with a question is Jane Altschul.
Thank you so much, Lucy. My question is, what are your biggest pieces of advice for incoming college freshmen who are planning on majoring in political science?
Well, thank you, Jane, for that question. My advice would be to anyone who is entering college. And my view is that, as far as I can tell, you only live once. And so whatever dream it is that you have, I think you should try pursuing that, whether it's to be a doctor or a clarinet player or an accountant, whatever it may be. I think you should pursue that because I'm not aware of any other lifetime in which you can do it. And if political science is something you're passionate about, then by all means, you should major in it. But I would explore in college. It's one of the few times where you can spend a lot of time simply looking at different subjects and taking in different classes. And I would encourage folks to explore and then to pursue your passions.
Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Bobby Bennett with the next question.
Thanks, Jane. My question was, what new legislation is being proposed regarding the regulation of artificial intelligence, and what are your thoughts on them?
So my colleagues and Republican colleagues, we created the House Bipartisan Task Force on Artificial Intelligence. I was appointed as a co-chair of that task force, along with Congressman Jay Obernolte, and it had 12 Republicans, 12 Democrats. We put out a task force report this past December. It's available online. You can take a look at it. It's over 250 pages. You don't have to read all 250, but there is a summary at the beginning, and we do lay out a number of different areas where we think we should legislate. Sorry, I have the hiccups, but I'm very pleased that last term I was able to get through my law that says no matter how amazing AI gets, we're never ever going to let it launch a nuclear weapon by itself. There's always got to be a human in the loop. And so something that folks might want to consider is, what other use cases should we require a human in the loop in terms of AI applications? But because there's so many use cases, right, millions and millions and millions, I think it's hard to sort of generally say, we have one bill that regulates all of it. I think that's impossible. I think it's going to be discrete in specific areas. And you have to sort of point out a harm that is happening or that you're trying to prevent that would require that kind of legislation.
Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Sarah O'Grady with the next question.
Thank you, Bobby. And the question I have for the congressman is, how have your legislative strategies shifted as a consequence of the current political landscape?
Well, it's very different if you're in the minority versus the majority. And so the House of Representatives is a very majoritarian institution. So whoever has a majority essentially runs the House. The Senate is a little different, where you've got the filibuster, you have individual senators that can hold things up for very long periods of time. And so on the House is not like that. In the House, if you can get a majority of the votes, then basically you set the floor schedule, you set the committee chairs, you set the memberships on the committees in terms of the numbers of that each party get, and you set the agenda on the House floor. So because we're not in the majority, we have been essentially trying to do everything we can to stop stupid stuff when they come. And you got the Republicans who have been introducing all sorts of different measures that we believe are harmful, from stripping away environmental protections to harming our economy. By the way, we had a growing economy all of last year. We had a growing economy last quarter. And then this quarter, under Republican control, we went into negative GDP growth. And so we're very focused as House Democratic Caucus on kitchen table issues in lowering the cost of groceries, lowering the prices of consumer goods. Unfortunately, you've got a presidential administration that seems intent on doing the opposite with their indiscriminate tariffs.
Thank you, Congressman. And I'd like to pass it over to Perrin to ask the next question.
Thank you, Sarah. My question is, how do you think the current tariffs will affect America's relations with other countries?
I think indiscriminate tariffs are really stupid. And they're stupid because certain countries simply have certain advantages. So I had this opportunity to visit small businesses during National Small Business Week. I was with my colleague Delia Ramirez in Chicago. So we visited this coffee shop that imported coffee beans from Colombia. So look, America is just not going to have a whole bunch of coffee plantations all over the place. And we're just not going to be able to compete growing coffee beans. When you have indiscriminate tariffs, all of a sudden, basically, this small business and consumers are going to end up paying more for coffee. We also visited a Chinese restaurant, and they have to pay more for imported foods such as bamboo shoots. Well, America is never going to have a whole bunch of bamboo forests, right? That's just not going to happen. And so when you have indiscriminate tariffs, again, what this means is people are going to end up paying more for imported foods that they can't get in the US and will never get, or the small business has to do that as well. It's also hurting relations with other countries because when you do these indiscriminate tariffs, essentially you're slowing down economic activities of both our country as well as all the other countries, and no other country likes that. And then you have these planned reciprocal tariffs that the administration had paused for 90 days, but those were going to increase these indiscriminate tariffs even more. So right now there's a 10% indiscriminate tariff on everything, basically coming to the United States. And then for China, there's a 30% tariff. And then for Mexico and Canada, there are 25% tariff on a variety of products. So these are really pretty high tariffs, and it's the highest amount of tariffs the U.S. has ever had in our history. And what you see happening is that's slowing down our economy, and then you see the cost of consumer goods that are going to rise. There's going to be a time lag because lots of stores still have inventory and so on, but that's going to be taken up. And then you're going to start having the prices start increasing. And you may have seen Walmart announce a few days ago they're going to start price increases on a number of their products because of the tariffs.
Thank you, Congressman. And now I'll hand it over to Hunter with the last question.
Hi, Ted Lieu. Hi, Congressman Lieu. What role are you playing to protect American democracy? And then what role do you want your constituents to play?
Thank you so much for that question. So what we've seen from the Trump administration are a series of harmful policies, both to our economy as well as to healthcare. And we're seeing a number of policies that many believe are lawless. They are snatching people without due process and deporting them to foreign countries like El Salvador. They've deported U.S. citizen children. They have essentially been cutting off all sorts of grants for cancer research and research into heart disease and diabetes without any process whatsoever. And so Leader Jeffries has set out a 10-point plan that basically has three themes in fighting back. There is litigation, legislation, and mobilization. So in terms of legislation and litigation, let's talk about litigation first. Over 210 lawsuits have been filed. There's been over 94 injunctions issued by judges who have been appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents. Most of the cases the Trump administration is losing. And then we're going to be litigating those issues in those cases. In terms of legislation, we just need 3 Republicans to join us, and we can stop stupid stuff coming from the administration and from the Republican caucus. The Republicans have a very thin majority of only 3 people. And we've been going to put pressure on moderate Republicans to try to get them to join Democrats to do the right thing. And that leads to mobilization. So we've been trying to get constituents and different folks to engage in town halls, as well as protests, marches, rallies, and so on. We've been going to Republican districts and doing town halls. So during Trump's first term, I went to Congressman Dana Rohrabacher's district, as well as Congressman Devin Nunes' district. Both of them are Republicans. I did town halls for them because they weren't doing their own town halls. So I greatly enjoyed doing that. And now we have a more systematic program where we're sending Democratic members of Congress to red districts, to Republican districts to do town halls. And all of that is having an effect. You see the president having the lowest approval at the 100-day mark of any president in the last 80 years. You saw the president fire his national security advisor. He didn't have to do that, but he did because of pressure. And you see the president not going forward with a number of different actions. And a lot of these executive orders have, as I said, been stopped by the courts. And then specifically, again, to your question about constituents, I'm going to paraphrase James Madison, who in 1788 basically said something to the effect of that it's the virtue of the people that's going to save the democracy. So every Democratic member of the House is going to do what we can to try to save our democracy. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the American people rising up that's going to do that. It's not just going to be the 200 some members of House Democratic caucus that's going to save democracy. It's going to take millions and millions of Americans rising up and saying no to the anti-democratic actions of Republicans and the Trump administration. And that's what's going to save democracy. And we're starting to see that happen more and more with every passing day. And I want people to understand the power that you have to shape public sentiment. I think Abraham Lincoln had it right when he said that public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And think about, for example, writing letters to the editor. It is true, a lot of people write letters to the editor, but many of them come from the same people. So when you start writing in, especially younger people, then you're going to eventually get published and you can start changing hearts and minds. Social media is free. And if you write an interesting post, maybe someone in North Carolina will see it, or in Florida or in Ohio. And then think about supporting different organizations and causes that you like, and then also showing up to town halls and making your voices heard.
Thank you so much. And the floor is yours for your closing statement. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much again for the hard work of the Youth Advisory Council and for your great presentations today. As you can tell, there are so many different areas that Congress has jurisdiction over. Thank you for selecting the areas you did. Those are critical areas. And I have co-authored already a number of the bills that all of you had recommended. The other ones doesn't mean I'm not going to co-author them. They're still under review. And so I do expect I'm going to co-author a number more of the bills that all of you have recommended. And the mere fact that you recommend them forces my staff and me to take a look at those bills. So thank you for doing that. I also want to thank my staff for putting on this town hall. Want to thank Aurelia. Sorry, I keep having hiccups. Aurelia Friedman Frank, as well as Janet Turner and Ava Cross. Thank you for your hard work. And I want to also say that we currently have applications open for the Youth Advisory Council for next year. And I'm going to have Aurelia explain how people can apply.
Thank you so much, Congressman Lieu, for your time and for the Youth Advisory Council. This is one of the most favorite parts of my job, is to see all of you feel that your voices are heard and valued, and I am so proud of all of you. So like the Congressman said, we are starting our application process for 2025 to 2026. The dates of the meetings for next year are already up on our website, and you can check that out following the link on our website. If you go to lieu.house.gov and go under Helping You, you will find the Youth Advisory Council there, and you can find all the details that I'm about to go over. The application deadline is Friday, July 11th. I will be in contact with a lot of the different school districts and principals, but please watch this. We will post it on YouTube afterwards, and also encourage your friends and anyone who you think is within the 9th through 12th grade window that is interested in making a difference to apply for the Youth Advisory Council. The required application materials are over here. That includes your high school transcript, however far you've gone so far. If you're anywhere from going into 9th grade or going into 12th grade, you can apply. So your middle school transcript would qualify for an incoming 9th grader or a freshman. You need 2 letters of recommendation that are not family members, and then you can submit a 1-page essay explaining why you would like to become a Youth Advisory Council member for Congressman Lieu. And then you have to submit your resume, and then there's a signed consent form that you will have to complete, as well as an application form, and the links to those are on the website. If you have any questions, you can email me, and you can contact our office at 323-651-1040, and then you can submit all the application materials to yac.lieu@mail.house.gov. So if you have any other questions about that, and if your teachers are doing your letters of recommendation and don't want to submit it all in one email, I've said for the ease of our staff, it's best if you submit everything else in one email so that we can make sure we have everything consolidated. But if your recommenders don't feel comfortable with you having their letter of rec in one email, they can submit it separately as well. The terms are 1 year at a time, but if there is a returning council member and they're in good standing, they can apply for a 2nd year. And we are just so grateful for all of you for attending today, and to continue the success of this program. It has been going on since 2018, and again, it's a really great hallmark of the work our office does, and the congressman, and hearing all of the students out and implementing the change that they want to see in the world. So thank you again, and hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye, everyone.